It's 1990 in Japan. It's the last decade of the 20th century, and you're on the conveyor belt to Y2K and the digital age. But it's not quite here yet. It's a time of economic highs and lows, and this so-called lost decade will create some amazing art. You're at the dawn of a golden age for one of the country's greatest exports, anime. Several great anime from the late 80s carry over into the new decade, from Doraemon to Ranma 1/2, and the big one that will in some short time captivate the West, Dragon Ball Z. In terms of animated films, 1990 is the year of A Wind Named Amnesia and a Devilman OVA. And for those keeping up with it, March heralds episode 7 of Bubblegum Crisis. Hey everyone, Khalil here with the first installment of a new series where I'll be trying out different anime from each year of the 90s. These aren't going to be deep dives, more of first impressions, because instead of covering each series in their entirety, which would all but guarantee I never actually finish this project, instead I'm only going to be watching and discussing the first 3 episodes of each anime. And since this is all about testing how each show fares against the 3-episode rule, I'm also not going to be spoiling anything past the start of these series. So not only am I getting to try out a bunch of cool new shows, some obscure and some very well known, but this way you're also getting a sampler that gives you a taste of what each of these anime has to offer without taking away all of your incentives to actually watch the show. And if you have seen some of these shows, I'd love to read your thoughts on them in the comments. Just tag at the top if you're going to be giving spoilers. Also, to give credit where credit's due, and shout out some stellar work being done here on YouTube, this series is greatly inspired by Seanson. And if I can do a little bit of what he's been doing for PlayStation 1 games, but instead for anime, well, that's my goal. And since I have nothing further to ramble on about, let's go ahead and get started and see what Japanese names I can mispronounce.
人と街に響き合う日野ニュークルージングレンジャー誕生。日野自動車。
Watashi no Ashinaga Oji-san, or My Daddy Longlegs, is a 40-episode anime series that aired Sunday nights in Japan, from January 1990 to December 1990. It was also re-released in 2001 as 2 45-minute specials. The series was made by Nippon Animation, who you may also know from the 1999 take on Hunter x Hunter, or the 2006 shoujo anime, The Wallflower. My Daddy Longlegs is part of the long-running Sekai Meisaku Gekijo, or World Masterpiece Theater, which showcased animated versions of different classic books each year on Fuji TV, from way back in 1969 to 1997, before resuming again in 2007 until 2009. After a quick glance at Wikipedia, I found out that only 7 of these anime were ever dubbed into English for distribution in North America, and those were Fables of the Green Forest, Tom Sawyer, Swiss Family Robinson, Little Women, The Adventures of Peter Pan, The Bush Baby, and Tico and Friends. My Daddy Longlegs is an adaptation of the John Webster novel of the same name, which was published in 1912 as part of this subgenre of books that were aimed at girls and focused on young female protagonists going through life-changing scenarios, which related to college, career, and marriage. And somehow, this 1990 series isn't even the first time that My Daddy Longlegs had been adapted into anime. That actually was in 1978, when it was featured in 4 installments as part of the Dax International and Madhouse anime anthology series Manga Sekai Mukashi Banashi, which I've seen translated into English as Merlin's Cave, Wonderful Tales from Around the World, and alternatively also Manga Fairy Tales of the World. And just 1 year later, in 1979, My Daddy Longlegs also got turned into an anime film courtesy of Tatsunoko Production. Nippon Animation's 1990 adaptation marks the first anime credit of Tsuyoshi Kaga, who would later go on to work on episodes 4 and 10 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Kazuyoshi Yokota also contributed to the storyboarding and direction of My Daddy Longlegs. Yokota had worked on the World Masterpiece Theater series since its very beginning in 1975, with A Dog of Flanders. Among other credits, he was extensively involved in the Anne of Green Gables anime from 1979, and just before My Daddy Longlegs, Yokota had helped make the 1988 adaptation of the Grimm's Fairy Tales into anime. My Daddy Longlegs opens with a gentle and warm throwback pop song that immediately felt nostalgic to me. The soundtrack is sprinkled with these lullaby-like tracks, which often convey sentimentality and this quiet yearning and air of hope. The character designs are expressive, with shoujo proportions and attire that reflects their social class, whether their clothes fit or are oversized, whether the outfits are drab or colorful. There's plenty of visual gags to entertain young audiences, and I personally admire the watercolor episode title cards with their simple little scribble drawings. My Daddy Longlegs is the story of Judy Abbott, a lanky girl in red pigtails who is often so clumsy that she's like a chimpanzee still growing into her legs. She is one of the older kids still living at the orphanage, and while she often comes across as a clueless child and a total klutz, she's also aware of how others look at her, and the other orphans with concern and pity, which she decidedly doesn't like. Judy takes on the role of a big sister to the younger orphans, who she entertains with her antics and whimsy, but also consoles and guides in times of need. Right from the start, Judy is established as supportive and earnest, even if to adults, she might come across as more of a troublemaker and a problem child. When she's presented with the opportunity to possibly be chosen to go to high school and to be trained to work a job, Judy's excitement soars. But she's quickly shot down and told that she doesn't have a chance, that she was only called in with the other kids so she could be warned not to make trouble. In typical Judy fashion, she still aims to try her best, even when directly advised not to, and goes a bit overboard by loudly waking up everyone the next morning with her enthusiastic shouting. When given the chance to write about all of her life and experiences, Judy vents her frustrations about the dull and annoying aspects of her life onto the page. And, plot twist, her words in this reflective essay impress a mysterious committee member who arrives late. This so-called John Smith is a wealthy man who pays to send Judy to high school, and all he wants in exchange is a letter each month, where Judy can share how things are going at school and in her life. Judy takes to calling this mysterious benefactor her Daddy Longlegs, because of the long legs she sees in his shadow, as cast against the headlights when he departs that momentous night. As soon as Judy starts receiving her first allowance from John Smith, she uses it to buy toys for all the other orphans, which another child, Sadie, perceives as pity, as though Judy is acting now like she's special and such a good person for giving money to all these poor little orphans out there. Upon hearing this accusation, Judy freezes up with fear. She doesn't know how to react to others' anger or rejection. And then, on top of that, she gets yelled at for not thinking clearly, for buying toys for others when she really should be buying good clothes for herself so that she can go to school. But I really appreciate that this authority figure in her life isn't stereotypically evil. Like, she's not just some cardboard cutout of a cruel adult that takes some kind of sick pleasure out of punishing orphan children. No, after she rebukes Judy, she also makes sure that all of those toys are distributed evenly to the kids. She calls Judy out on what she sees as poor decision-making, but she also honors Judy's gift to the other children. The first 3 episodes of My Daddy Longlegs show a certain maturity when it comes to themes, which
I'll admit, surprised me, since I'd gone in with fairly low expectations. The series depicts how the fate of these children often rests on the whims of these fickle upper crust types, who are prone to turning up their noses and leaving events only after a few mild inconveniences. In many ways, for these children, love and financial support are conditional. In order to be accepted, they need to learn how to act with proper manners and be orderly to the utmost, which runs contrary to their impulses as, children, who would usually much rather have fun, like Judy does. And this perhaps explains in part why Judy hasn't been adopted yet, because she's so wild and free-spirited. When Judy boards the train and leaves the orphanage to go to New York and begin her high school adventure, there's this real weighty feeling in the air. And then, when she arrives at the Big Apple, she's immediately confronted by the indifferent bustle of the city, as everyone pushes against her, and someone steals her suitcase when she's not being careful. The city is full of people who jeer at her and shout at her for getting into traffic. When a good Samaritan observes the suitcase theft and pursues the thief on her behalf, I thought at first that maybe this is the way that the show is going to demonstrate that some truly selfless people exist in the city, people who would go out of their way to help a stranger. But it turns out later that, in fact, he's associated with John Smith, meaning he already had a reason to look out for Judy. So, hypothetically, if there wasn't someone presumably being paid to help the poor girl out, would anyone have actually cared or intervened when her things were stolen? This isn't a question that the show answers, but it's one that it made me think about. Now, this is all pretty simple stuff, but I appreciate that this is a children's show that depicts an interesting conflict between Judy's endearing trust and hope versus the real need for caution and preparation in the adult world. No doubt that as the show goes on, Judy will likely learn some hard lessons about her world, and that creates this great opportunity for the writers to also teach real children watching at home about the adult world too. When Judy helps move some items into a car, she's confused why they'd want to pay her for simply helping out. And she's also confused why the girl inside the car didn't help at all. And it's apparent here that Judy doesn't understand social class or the value of money. When she meets her new roommates later, it turns out that one of them is that same rich girl from earlier, Julia Rutledge Pendleton, who, by the way, is voiced by Yuri Amano, the voice actor for the main character's love interest in Yu Yu Hakusho, the childhood friend Keiko Yukimura. Judy insists that she can't keep the $10 tip from earlier, because if other kids from the country knew that they could get that kind of money just from helping Julia, they'd all come flocking in. And Judy is so weirded out by Julia, who she concludes must not be feeling well, because she keeps saying that she doesn't like her nice clothes, and that she can't sleep if she doesn't like her wallpaper, so it simply must be replaced. At one point, Judy even says that she feels sorry for Julia, because no matter how beautiful or lovely the things are in her life, it seems like she can't be happy. And hearing someone like Judy say something like that obviously does not sit well with the privileged Julia Rutledge Pendleton. These first 3 episodes do a great job introducing audiences to our main character, her mysterious Daddy Longlegs, and her wealthier roommates. This is only just the beginning of a 40-episode series, and already it feels like there's a lot of story potential with these characters, and the many possible upcoming scenarios. And the question on my mind would be, will the young and naive Judy Abbott be able to face the upcoming tribulations of high school with her innocence still intact? Or will she have to change who she is in order to adapt to all these new challenges in her life? In other words, in this new environment, can Judy Abbott stay Judy Abbott?
pizza cats.
Oh yeah! Who do you call when you want some pepperoni?
Samurai pizza cats.
Right on! They're stamping out crime, and you know that ain't baloney.
In 1991, Saban Entertainment, who are also known for ushering in Power Rangers and dubbing the first 3 Digimon series, picked up the rights to the 52-episode Kyoto Ninden Tiandi, or Cat Ninja Legend Tiandi, and localized it for English-language speakers as Samurai Pizza Cats. They didn't work off a translation. Who do you think they are, losers? But instead said in the show's theme song that since no one has found the script, they've been making up the story as they go along. So they threw in a bunch of pop culture references about things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Ajax Cleaner, and the rest is classic goofy English dub history. The original Kyoto Ninden Tiandi was made by Tatsunoko Production and had an absolutely stacked voice cast. In what I'm sure must be a short list of similarities between this Samurai Cat anime and Death Note, it turns out that the Japanese voice actor for the main character Yataro would in due time manifest as none other than the world-famous detective L, as well as Usopp in One Piece. Ai Orikasa may be the voice for Pururun, but her main claim to fame is her ongoing role as Ryuko Hakubi in the various incarnations of Tenchi Muyo throughout the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and yet again in 2020. And there's Karumaru's voice actor Kyuichi Yamadera, who you probably know from Cowboy Bebop as Spike Spiegel, and also Ein. But of course, we're here to talk about Samurai Pizza Cats, not Kyoto Ninden Tiandi. In this oddball iteration, Speedy Cerviche is the quick and confident leader of a trio of crime-fighting, pizza-delivering cats that also consists of the chill flirt Guido Anchovy and Polyester, the obligatory girl of the bunch. Or should I say, brunch.
Can you believe those 2 guys getting all pry-eyed over a girl like Lucille? Tomcats, you can't live with them and you can't throw them down a well and drown them. There really ought to be a law.
Their home of Little Tokyo is described as a city of contrasts and contradictions, of old and new, of relatable and absurd. One of the first impressions we get of our main cast is a scene where Speedy tells Lucille that, to him, she's not just some hand-painted animated character, but something more. Only for Guido to intercede and flirt with her instead.
There once was a beauty named Lucille, whose pretty puss could make a pussycat real.
As if the wanton destruction of the Brazilian rainforest weren't enough for you, you're the most environmentally irresponsible person I've ever met.
Save that pinko pop ecology stuff for the next Greenpeace newsletter.
Who's a pinko, you neo-fascist feline?
Meanwhile, the evil bad bird watches the unsuspecting masses, who he likens to earthworms waiting for the early bird to arrive, and his hostile takeover preludes with a cloud of darkness overtaking the city, which prompts a pig to ask his wife if she left the oven on again. A robot dragon wiggles forth, while Lucille meanwhile is preoccupied worrying if she'll still get to eat her pizza. And this issue, the one with the dragon, not the pizza, forces representatives of the business committee to have an emergency discussion at City Hall. But most of them only care about how this dragon attack is actually benefiting some of their businesses, like how more people are buying running shoes lately on account of needing to run for their lives on the regular. There's also some conflict between Big Al Dente, who wants to enlist the Samurai Pizza Cats to fight the dragon, and the Big Cheese, who is secretly in on the whole dragon thing. As they bicker, the dragon's so-called orgy of destruction continues, until the Samurai Pizza Cats spring into action with a series of signature moves and strike the dragon down, much to the Big Cheese's chagrin. And that's the first episode, entitled Stop Draggin' My Cat Around. My first thoughts are that the humor is carrying the whole experience of what otherwise would be a rather plain scenario of saving a city from the disaster of the week. I like that the main opponents of the cats are birds and rodents, who normally would be, prey for a cat. Or at least I think that's supposed to be a rodent in the English version, since, he's called the Big Cheese. But honestly, he looks more like a fox. And the script just sort of ignores how all of these characters look more like marionettes or robots or dolls. And at one point, the narrator even goes so far as to mention that our three heroes always wear fur, when they don't actually have fur, right?
Oh, I love drama. How do you deal with drama and danger?
I lift one eyebrow and no communist.
Fine for you, at least you have eyebrows. I've been forced to go through life without any. I find this highly amusing. We will now laugh.
In episode 2, If You Knew Sushi Like I Know Sushi, Bad Bird's ninja crows kidnap a local sushi maker. Upon hearing his harrowing scream, his sister remarks that it was really such an awful scream, so bad, in fact, that she really wishes he wouldn't scream like that whenever he gets kidnapped. It's very unpleasant. The monster of the week this time is a giant sushi-making robot, and of course the Samurai Pizza Cats save the mind-controlled and kidnapped sushi maker in the end. A highlight of the episode is that we get to see how the Samurai Cats take pizza orders and deliver them to pie-desiring pedestrians. The third episode is called Underground, Underwater, Undercooked. And would you believe me if I told you that in this episode, the three heroes have to save the day from a mischievous scheme by Bad Bird and the Big Cheese? These first 3 episodes, and I'm going to guess most of the rest of the show, are very formulaic. But I think if you're looking for a comfort show, this is something that I could see someone, especially a young kid, really getting into. The familiar repetition, the cuteness, and all the silliness make it a good Saturday morning style cartoon, while the constant barrage of pop culture references and puns and rhyming and alliteration make this feel like an irreverent, abridged series rather than a legitimate localization.
Whoa! I want out of this cartoon!
Wait-o! Oh, my breath smells awful. I forgot to brush my teeth after lunch again.
Oh!
If all this sounds like your thing, well, then you're in luck, because there's like 49 more episodes of Samurai Pizza Cats, all for you to gobble up. Or, you know, if you hate fun and you prefer original artistic vision, there's also all of Kyoto Ninden Tiandi. But this appetizer has been more than enough to satisfy me. Check, please.
We kittens are a special breed. We never call retreat.
Whenever Big Cheese knocks us down,
We land upon our fate.
Back in the mid-1970s, Hayao Miyazaki signed on to develop a new TV series for the animation titans Toho. One of the ideas, which ultimately did not get made, was set to be an adaptation of Jules Verne's science fiction adventure novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. While Miyazaki would later reincorporate elements from his original concept for use in Castle in the Sky and Future Boy Conan, Toho retained the rights to the story outline, which eventually culminated in the 39-episode anime Nadia: The Secret of Blue Water, which was produced by Toho, NHK, and Korad, and was made by group TAC, Dongwoo A&E, and Gainax. At the series' helm was Hideaki Anno, who had, by this point in his career, done key animation on projects such as 1982's Macross, Urusei Yatsura, and Studio Ghibli's Grave of the Fireflies. Nadia was Anno's big, ambitious project following the 1988 Gunbuster OVA, And by the time the show wrapped up in April 1991, Studio Gainax had lost 80 million yen on the project. And also, as a bow on top, didn't even retain the rights to the series. They were only able to recoup their losses through a video game tie-in and the dramatic success of their 1995 anime, Neon Genesis Evangelion, which reportedly was originally planned to be a sequel to Nadia. But since NHK still had the rights to Nadia, they had to make some changes to their latest experiment. Anno was joined by several key Gainax regulars to make Nadia the Secret of Blue Water, such as Mahiro Maeda, Shioichi Masuo, and Shinji Higuchi. Kenjiro Kawando, who produced Nadia, would later go on to produce the massive hit Fairy Tail, and two of the series' main characters were voiced by legends of Japanese voice acting. First, Noriko Hidaka was the young protagonist boy, Jean. She'd also been Noriko from Gainax's Gunbuster, and later on she'd voice Nier from Death Note and feature in the likes of Pop Team Epic and Little Witch Academia. And then there's Akio Utsuka, who portrays Captain Nemo in Nadia, as well as Ryder in Fate Zero, Bato in Ghost in the Shell, the titular Blackjack, Thorkel in Vinland Saga, Detective Konakawa in Satoshi Kon's Paprika, and this guy in Bleach. Casting an eye back on it now, upon further reflection, Nadia the Secret of Blue Water is easily one of the biggest anime releases of the year 1990. There's a particular OVA series that has more My Anime List members than Nadia, which, fret not, we'll get to soon, but otherwise this is probably the anime you're most likely familiar with already. And even though this is my first time seeing any of it, I know enough of where Nadia goes to be aware that the first 3 episodes may not be indicative of the whole show's tone and the pacing all the way through. That said, what kind of first impression does this historic baton pass from Miyazaki to Anno leave when viewed over 30 years later? Well, episode 1 opens with a call to adventure from a mysterious challenger beckoning the brave to find him. We're then hit with the year 1889, amidst the affluent rise of the Industrial Revolution, amidst trade wars, amidst world powers scrambling to colonize parts of Africa and Asia. Meanwhile, set against this historical backdrop is an anomaly. Ships are being consumed in the Atlantic Ocean, and there's talk of terrible sea monsters being the root cause. Or perhaps instead, secret new military weapons being tested with no survivors left to tell the full tale. After that preamble, we meet our male protagonist, Jean, who is on his way to the Paris World Exposition. This is all quite exciting for the young inventor, but he also knows that not everyone here has the chops, and he correctly predicts that a flying contraption about to take off will only make it 8 meters out before crashing. Then enters the mysterious girl, Nadia, and Jean is entranced. It's only too bad that it's not just Jean that's taken an interest in the girl, because a red-haired onlooker named Miss Grandis, alongside her 2 cronies, is tracking Nadia and seeks to possess the jewel around her neck, the blue water. An exciting chase sequence ensues, accompanied by this energetic music, and between all the cartoony sound effects and the English dub voices for the henchmen Seanson and Hansen, the whole escapade ends up being quite silly and fun. Jean wants to be Nadia's friend, but Nadia has her guard up, potentially hinting that she has plenty of reasons to be suspicious of strangers. But when Jean offers Nadia a rose and promises to help her escape Miss Grandis, Nadia decides to accept his help. And her initial trust is rewarded when Jean flies his homebrewed airplane off the competition ramp, which carries both him and Nadia out of Miss Grandis' clutches. Nadia thanks him and asks for a reintroduction, because now she's actually giving him the time of day. They open up to each other and talk about how they each don't have parents. Nadia doesn't know where she was born, and Jean has been living with his aunt and uncle after his father was lost at sea. Since they never found the body, Jean still holds out hope that his father is out there somewhere. But you can tell by the expression on the uncle's face that the rest of the family have likely already accepted his death. They've barely gotten away from Miss Grandis when, in the second episode, she and her henchmen continue their pursuit. Their shape-shifting vehicle is now a submersible and poses a serious threat, but Jean is shown again to be resourceful, as he outwits Miss Grandis and overcomes the submarine's superior size and budget. But right as Nadia's confidence and estimation of Jean is at its highest, the engine gives out, because Jean hadn't tested it for this kind of endurance. Jean's a brilliant inventor, but he's still a child, and the path to his home is littered with the makeshift graves of his previous failed aerial attempts. Episode 2 is a bit more subdued than the first one, but it still carries on the story nicely. A recurring aspect is how Nadia keeps going from disappointed and doubtful of Jean to quickly excited again whenever he proves himself, and it's an up and down feeling that sometimes runs the risk of whiplash.
Wow, another faulty machine. I shouldn't have expected anything more. It's incredible! Did you and your uncle build this?
Jean says that his dream is to build a flying ship that can go around the world, and then he'll use it to look after his father, who must be out there somewhere. In the meantime, though, he says that they're going to fly to Africa together, to search if Nadia's home is somewhere there on that massive continent. But when Grandis appears again, they gotta make a run for it. And for the second time in a row, an episode of Nadia ends with a vehicle of Jean's breaking down. This time, his plane, the Étoile de la Seine 8. They're rescued by this huge American battleship, under the charge of Captain Melville, who says he can drop them off in France in 3 days. Shortly after the children board this big boat, Captain Melville wards off the encroaching Miss Grandis, who he quickly overwhelms and captures. It seems like smooth sailing until the rumored and feared sea beast appears, first on its own, and then joined by what's presumed to be its mate. And upon returning again to the ship, it rips a hole in the hull and causes the vessel to start to fill with water and sink. Miss Grandis is inadvertently freed in the ensuing chaos, and episode 3 ends yet again with Nadia and Jean stranded. But at least this time, the craft that broke down wasn't Jean's, but instead the US government's. The first 3 episodes leave Jean, Nadia, and her lion cub King clinging to Jean's stranded and downed airplane for refuge. The story has been pretty simple so far, but there's already some intrigue. Where exactly is Nadia from? Could it be the underwater city of lights shown in the OP? And what's with the sea creatures? One of which lights up and clearly looks more like an advanced, high-tech vessel than any kind of animal. But the other one we don't get a clear glimpse of. Is that one a real sea monster? And regarding both of these entities from the deep, are they friend or foe? Allied, or themselves embroiled in some unknown conflict? Either way, Nadia makes it clear where she stands. While Jean is amazed by the American vessel, she's distrustful and calls Jean out for being so excited by a warship that's designed to kill people and extinguish life. And when Nadia doesn't eat the food that the crew have provided for her, she reveals that she doesn't eat meat. Her compassion toward all of Earth's creatures extends to the supposed sea beast. She urges Captain Melville not to destroy an innocent creature, She says that these creatures would be peaceful if mankind wasn't invading their home. I'm curious how much colonialism factors into the narrative and themes of the series. The first episode opens up with historical context of Western colonizers and capitalist traders rushing to exploit African and Asian countries. Nadia herself was borderline a slave to the French circus, a circus that exoticizes her as a so-called jungle dancer. Miss Grandis almost certainly would have succeeded in purchasing Nadia with the power of a bag full of coins had it not been for Jean's interference. Now, whether the rest of the show explores colonialism and racism with increasing depth, or if it falls back on its cartoon hijinks of repetitive encounters with Miss Grandis, or most likely falls somewhere in between, I gotta say, the first 3 episodes of the show leave a great impression. The character designs are distinct and memorable. The animation is fluid and expressive. The color palette is often quite pretty. And at least in the English dub, after the first episode, there's these really charming recaps at the start of every new installment. The OP begins with these dramatic opening vocal notes, followed by energetic keyboard and bass instrumentals, Gainax's rapid edits and shots of the main characters, and visuals that instill such a sense of adventure. It's dynamic, always moving, and full of big summer energy. But the show itself frequently contains these moments of pause and quiet. It's in the pensive staring, the imploring of the ocean, and standing in the gentle breeze, looking out onto the thin line where the sky meets the sea. That's the mood. It's Jules Verne by way of Nausicaa Valley of the Wind. If you have a passing interest in Hideaki Anno or Hayao Miyazaki, this is already a notable series to check out. But even without that context, Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water starts off strong and hints at an even greater journey ahead. This is a unique, stylish adventure anime that I definitely want to revisit in the future. NG Knight Ramune and 40, also known as NG Knight Ramune and 40, is an action-adventure fantasy mecha series that ran from April 1990 to January 1991. It was continued through OVA sequels in 91 and 93, a new series in 1996, and another 6-episode OVA in 1997. At which point, these characters lied dormant in a chunk of ice somewhere until 2009, when a portion of the cast appeared in the Nintendo Wii game Super Robot Wars Neo. This inclusion in a Wii game might seem a bit random, but it's actually pretty fitting. The NG in NG Knight Ramune stands for New Generation. And you know what this new generation of 90s kids really are?
gamers. Hence, the premise of the show is that some kid named Baba Ramune gets sucked into a video game, wherein he must save the world from the nefarious big bad villain who is trying to summon a doom god to do, doom god things to the world. Ramune's name is a reference to the popular Japanese drink, the name itself originally deriving from the English word lemonade. And there's other characters in this series who are named after drinks too, like Decider, Cocoa, and Milk. No, not that Milk. Not that one either. Yes, that one with the elf ears. Takehiko Ito, also known for 1998's Outlaw Star, came up with the series' original concept and character designs. NG Knight Ramune and 40 also shares storyboarding and writing credits with famous action shows like Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, Fairy Tail, and Sailor Moon. The main character is voiced by Takashi Kusao, who, shortly later after, voiced the Rebound King Hanamichi Sakuragi from Slam Dunk. And Decider is voiced by Kazuki Yao, who later on would portray Frankie from One Piece. Our main character, Baba Ramune, is first introduced as a kid in the 4th grade who plays video games into the wee hours of the night, oversleeps, and winds up late for school. He runs from his teachers and plays tricks on the principal, but eventually his antics catch up to him. Before he even gets to meet the evil wizards and doom gods, he has to contend with the real villain of episode 1, this teacher.
ババラムネ、うさぎ小屋で放課後まで懲役にしよっす。そんな、先生勘弁してよ。ダメよラムネ君。ゆっくり反省してね。
After being stuck in a rabbit pen and mocked by his peers, Ramune returns home and along the way buys a video game from a girl for only 10 yen. He inserts the game cartridge and starts to play King Squasher. Like all real gamers, he's too busy saving video game worlds to take a bath. At midnight, he finally beats the game, but then he watches the TV glow and that girl from earlier materializes in front of him. Turns out that Baba Ramune has the blood of the destined hero Ramunes burning within him, and this was all proven by his pro gamer strats. Remember, this was before widespread internet access, and I sure didn't see him buy a strategy guide for this game, a game that, mind you, he'd never even heard of until a few hours ago. This kid practically invented speedrunning and did it on his first playthrough. The girl forces Ramune into the TV, and he gets the early 90s equivalent to isekai'd into the world of the video game King Squasher. The villain Don Harumage senses this and sends his servants Decider and Lesqua, along with a whole bunch of monsters, to stop this new hero and lay waste to the country. And in case you're wondering, yes, Lesqua is also named after a drink. But apparently it's a secret name that you don't learn until later in the show, so I'm gonna play it safe, with the spoilers, and leave what kind of drink she is to be this super interesting mystery. Anyway, when the mecha monsters abruptly start running amok outside, the king and his 2 daughters usher Ramune into the castle's basement, at which point he interfaces with some cool otherworldly computer console that confirms he is indeed the Chosen One, before bestowing upon him the awesome power of a loud, annoying side character. When Ramune attaches this robot to his shoulder, he can transform into a heroic warrior. And then, with this newfound power, while in the game King Squasher, he can shout the words King Squasher to summon a giant mech called the King Squasher. And thankfully, Ramune must have obtained through some secret channels a very early advanced VHS copy of Disney's Hercules, because he knew better than to slice off the heads of this hydraulic hydra and instead killed it quick with a clean slice through its body. A severely disappointed Don Harumage sends the returning failures Decider and Lesqua straight to Punisher, who cartoonishly, but still violently, tortures the incompetent secondary antagonists for what I presume is the amusement of the show's real-world child audience. Maybe it's also to show that being a bad guy means you'll get what's coming to you. But honestly, all this did was make me feel bad for these 2 dummies. At the same time, Ramune turns practicing controlling his fighting robot into a game of sillily sillily playing for his own amusement, to the concern and disappointment of the people for whom his success means the very real life and death of their world and civilizations. Ramune begins a quest to find the 8 Guardian Knights, who will form, RPG-style, a party that is needed to thwart Don Harumage. Milk goes on a tantrum because her sister didn't pack food for them on their flying ship, but when they crash land in Poking City, there's no food there either, and everyone is writhing on the ground from starvation. This kid named Cham explains that the head priest had warned that the city would soon fall into darkness. So, to prevent that, all of the city's food has been pushed somewhere else, i.e., to the temple idol. I've been playing through Dragon Quest IV on my phone recently for the first time, and honestly, this reminds me a lot of the kind of situations that can happen when you wander into a village in Dragon Quest. Like, whenever you go to a new village or kingdom and there's a demon that's made a bargain with the local king, and now you, as the hero, gotta go sort out the dealings in secret and deal out some justice. Sure enough, the head priest is delightedly pocketing the spoils, and his rationale is that if Don Harumage is going to be ruling the world soon, he'd be foolish to be the only one trying to do what's best for the common good, so he might as well stock up in advance. There's ever so slightly more going on here than pure gluttony and greed. The evil in this situation is in trying to profit personally rather than upholding social values, in looking at a time of need not as a call to duty and public service, but as an opportunity. I feel like this has more in common with price gouging than it does with a mustache-twirling villain like Jafar. It's not profound or anything, but it does stand out a little in a good way. Instead of investigating the matter further, Ramune and his cohorts crash their ship through the barricade and into the temple, with a fight evil now, ask questions later type of approach. And fight evil they do, which leads to a confrontation with Decider, another destroyed mecha opponent, retribution against the corrupt head priest, and finally, some stuffed bread for Milk. While NG Knight Ramune and 40 doesn't have the irreverent, silly humor of the English language dub of Samurai Pizza Cats, I get the feeling that there's more potential here for some character work, while still operating within a similar Monster of the Week formula. Ramune is shown from the very first episode to be immature, impulsive, and not particularly bright. He's the kind of kid whose first solution is to headbutt a giant door, and he forgets which of his hands is his left and which hand is his right. So I think part of the appeal of this show would be to see the story of this rather ordinary kid grow into the role of a true hero. And this protagonist feels like an audience insert that a young boy could project himself onto. And that allows the show to be a vehicle for an imaginative, escapist adventure. That said, I am curious if, when all of this is said and done, the whole experience will actually have been real, or if instead it'll be revealed as a series of wild dreams simply conjured up by a 4th grader's late-night gaming sessions. Either way, there's some cool visuals, and I gotta praise the music especially, which is often the right kind of energetic blend of synthetic and electronic music that really fits the feeling of a retro video game character. Considering this got continued through OVAs and a sequel series, I reckon there's more to NG Knight Ramune and 40 than what the first 3 episodes present. So if you're curious to see more, I would say pop in the cartridge for yourself and get transported into this world that's so full of adventure.
Tanoshii Muumin Ikka, or the Delightful Muumin Family, stems from the Netherlands-based production company Telescreen, of Miffy fame, but it was animated by their Japanese branch, so unless you really want to fight an uphill battle of what does and doesn't count as an anime, I'm just gonna call it. Muumin, right here, is an anime. In fact, it's actually the third anime adaptation of the Finnish novels and comics by Tuve Jansson. The first anime adaptation was in 1969, and then shortly after it got remade in 1972. Now, this third version was super popular, and actually fueled what's been called the Muumin boom of the 90s. In Japan, Muumin characters became the official mascots of the Dai shopping center chain, and Muumin merch was this whole large industry. Back in Finland, the show reinvigorated interest in the characters, and new Muumin comics were being published. Finnish President Tarja Halonen wore a Muumin watch, and in 1993, they opened the Muumin World theme park in Naantali. The Helsinki-Vantaa International Airport started sprouting Moomins, and in 2006, Finnair decorated with Muumin 2 of its planes en route to Japan. This 1990 Muumin anime continued into 1992 with Tanoshii Muumin Ikka, Bokeniki, or The Delightful Muumin Family Adventure Diary, and that same year, there was also a prequel film. Because Death Note keeps cropping up in this video for some reason, yeah, the 1990 Muumin anime was overseen by one of the same producers as Death Note, Manabu Tamura, and in terms of vocal talent, this cute cartoon has some serious names attached to it. Nadia's Akio Otsuka worked on the Muumin anime during the same period. Conan and Griffith are here, Frieza's here, and you thought this was Snufkin, but it was actually Dio. Now, full confession, I've never read or watched anything Muumin related before. I think I've heard of it at some point, but this is my first real experience with Muumin. And I'll acknowledge here that this series has apparently been criticized somewhat for diluting the stories and characters into harmless family entertainment, for turning what originally was a more philosophical Muumin world into something highly commercialized and Walt Disney-like. But I honestly have no skin in this game, and don't know anything about that. All I can tell you about are these first 3 episodes. And they're quite lovely. Episode 1 brings springtime to Muumin Valley, and everyone wakes up from their long hibernation through the winter months. We meet Muumin Papa, Muumin Mama, and their son Muumin Troll, called Muumin for short. But since that could be confusing on account that that's also the name of the show and their family and I think their species, I'm going to keep referring to our main character as Muumin Troll. After hearing Snufkin playing his harmonica on the bridge, Muumin Troll recruits him and their friend Sniff to go climb a mountain. When they reach the top, they observe some pretty sights, but also find this big silk hat that's been abandoned. It kinda looks like Muumin Papa's, but he demonstrates that it's much too big for him to wear, so they decide to use it as a wastebasket. But when they actually put garbage in it, this happens. When the kids play hide and seek, Muumin Troll hides inside the hat, and he is transformed into this creepy pasta lemur thing. Muumin Troll is shocked into crisis mode by this animal he's become, and the music is now this creepy organ playing, and it's like low-key shockingly dark for the first episode of some little baby show.
ねえどうして黙ってるのママどうして僕のこと呼んでくれないの僕をムーミンって呼んでよママ
But when Muumin Mama looks deep into his eyes and recognizes her son, her acceptance and embrace transforms him back.
Honestly, I'm surprised they didn't make Muumin Troll do something to prove he was who he said he was, because maybe if they had him have to act like Muumin Troll, or display knowledge only Muumin Troll would have, that would have given the show an easy excuse to explain more about the main character to the audience. But nope, it's the power of love, baby. They then dispose of the hat by throwing it into the river. And that's episode 1. Now, for some overall thoughts. As you've no doubt noticed, the show has a very cool, soft color palette. It looks vintage in a way that subjectively feels older to me than other shows from 1990, but not in a bad way at all. And the accompanying music really adds to the mood through sometimes appropriately light and whimsical tunes, or alternatively, mysterious or even eerie melodies. Both the OP and ED are excellent. The opening features like enchanted strings, and there's these soft and twinkling notes, and then this sweeping, almost sadness transitions into a circus dance. There's lyrics about how when you need to cry, you should let it out, and then you'll find out that the sadness passes. And next, you should hold the singer's hand and be taken into a world of dreams, that if you have an honest heart, all will be well. But what if you don't have an honest heart? What if the Muumin smell lies inside you? As for the ending, I had an absolutely wild realization when I got to it after episode 1. I'd actually heard this song before, been listening to it for years, in fact. I just never knew it was a cover, let alone a cover of a song from a Muumin anime. The version of Tue Akugare that I'm familiar with is the one by Ichiko Aoba, which I've loved for years, and let me tell you, hearing it now under this totally new context only adds to the magic of both versions for me. Anyway, it's episode 2 of the anime, and already it's the beach episode. Things take a downward turn when Florin falls into an antlion's nest, and since she's disturbed the ants that he was planning on eating, the antlion decides to dine on her instead, which spurs her friends into a rescue effort to save her, which, of course, they do. Meanwhile, Snufkin has found out where the hat got stuck along the river's current, so he and Muumin Troll fetch it. Snufkin also learned that the hat belongs to a hobgoblin, one who flies through the sky on a black panther, in search of rubies throughout the universe. With the hat back in tow, Snufkin and Muumin Troll decide to play a vengeful trick on the antlion, and get him to dive inside the hat, which transforms him into this sad little hedgehog. I'd honestly give him about an hour before some large predator swoops down and eats him. A little later, their friend Little Mai places some knitting wool inside the hat, and it becomes a massive tree that overtakes their house. But hey, at least Little Mai is having a great time. This is also as good of a time as any to mention the characters. Muumin Troll and Florin are pretty standard boy and girl characters respectively, and Muumin Papa and Muumin Mama have a bit more personality, but generally speaking, they fill their parental roles respectively. Sniff, well, Sniff sucks. He eats everything, he has no aspirations or dreams, and he is an absolute coward who won't even make an effort to save his friend unless he's forced to. He's like this third wheel that they keep around either because they can't get rid of him, maybe they feel like it'd be too rude to tell him no, or perhaps it's because maybe they derive some sick pleasure out of bossing him around and occasionally getting to see him suffer.
which just leaves the two best characters. Snufkin is like this nomadic philosopher who has this quiet, listening, and reassuring presence. And Little Mai is the realist, a chaotic goblin who gets things done whenever it matters most. And I love everything that the Japanese VA is doing. Anyway, back to the Muumin household crisis. The hat's owner, the hobgoblin, shows up and causes the tree to wither with his magic. He asks if they have any rubies, and Muumin Mama shows him the one that Muumin Papa had given her, but the hobgoblin says that, while it is beautiful, it doesn't compare to the king of rubies, which he's been searching for, even going to the moon to look for. They promise to let him know if they ever see that legendary ruby, and then he thanks them and leaves with his enchanted hat. Episode 3 portrays 3 of the men in the valley in distress. Florin's inventor brother is in anguish because he can't figure out how to build his flying ship. Muumin Papa is in anguish because he's struggling to write his stories. And Mr. Hemulin is in anguish because he no longer feels the passion he used to feel for collecting stamps, now that his collection is complete. A sentiment that Snufkin ascertains, but the young Muumin troll doesn't understand. The kids inspect a damaged boat that's washed ashore. When they tell Muumin Papa and Florin's brother about the boat, they quickly agree to help repair it, with Mr. Hemulin deciding to assist as well. And unsurprisingly, working on the boat is exactly the type of challenge that all 3 of them needed to get back their spark. Less happens in this episode than in the previous, but the main themes are compelling, especially with Mr. Hemulin. What do you do when the thing you love no longer brings you the joy that it used to? Mr. Hemulin decides to start collecting plants. Because although it can be sad, when you conclude the last chapter in a book that you've grown to love, the good news is that now you get to start a new book. And there's excitement in that, isn't there? We know eventually that this book too will end, but then there'll be another book, so on and so forth. There'll always be more, and we can live inside those pocket moments of engaged bliss. My first impression of the 1990 Muumin anime is that it's like a sometimes darker and more mystical Winnie the Pooh. Both are aimed primarily at young audiences and focus on an odd group of cute friend characters, but also both can be surprisingly poignant from time to time, and are absolutely charming, not just for their respective art styles, which of course are endearing, but for the simple wisdom that they can impart. And if you like Winnie the Pooh, you'll probably like this too. And if you lump in the sequel series, well, you're set, because there's 101 more episodes of 90s Muumin goodness to wrap yourself up in and explore.
If the morning sun should free me, it really wouldn't let me go. I'd still be caught inside your love.
Many eons ago, in the distant time of the 1980s, writer Ryo Mizuno created a high fantasy world called Forsalia as the setting for his role-playing game. The gameplay mechanics, storytelling, and character types in Forsalia, along with the world itself, originally resembled Tunnels and Trolls, as well as, of course, Dungeons and Dragons. Mizuno took some of the stories from this world that he'd created and serialized the replays, or transcripts, in Japanese magazines from the mid to late 80s. And it's from the popularity of these replays, and later his novels, that the Record of Lodoss War series came to be adapted into animation. Record of Lodoss War is an OVA that released in Japan from 1990 to 1991, where you could buy VHS tapes that had one episode on each tape. The first 8 episodes of Record of Lodoss War are based on the first book, whereas the last 5 episodes more loosely connected to the 3rd and 4th novels, and conclude with an original ending, since at that time, the printed story had not actually finished yet. 1998's Record of Lodoss War, Chronicles of the Heroic Knight, picks up partway through the original 1990 OVA, but actually branches off and continues the story in a way that's more accurate and consistent with the original written source material. In 2019, the original author, Ryo Mizuno, released a novel sequel entitled Record of Lodoss War, The Crown of the Covenant, which takes place 100 years later after the original series. But today, we're just looking at the 1990 OVA, which may be the most famous iteration of the series outside of Japan. With over 82,000 members on MyAnimeList, this ranks as potentially the most popular new anime of 1990. Of course, there's yet another Death Note connection, as Masuo Maruyama was involved in the production of both Record of Lodoss War as well as Death Note. But much as I want to emphasize the ludicrous consistency with which Death Note keeps popping up in my research, in all fairness, Maruyama is prolific and has a huge list of credits that includes the likes of Monster and the films of both Satoshi Kon and Mamoru Hosoda. You've got Akio Sakai of Legend of the Galactic Heroes fame working on Episode 6, and Hirotsugo Kawasaki directing Episode 8, the same Kawasaki who storyboarded several Black Clover episodes, and did key animation for Akira, Ghost in the Shell, and Castle in the Sky. Hidetoshi Kaneko leads the art direction, and his resume includes doing the background art for Galaxy Express 999 and My Neighbor Totoro. After this, Kaneko would go on to be the art director for Trigun, Black Lagoon, and Terror in Resonance, among many others. And I mean many others. He has over 50 credits as an art director. So let's get right to it. Depending on what art styles you personally like the most, you could easily make the claim that no anime series has ever looked better than Record of Lodoss War. I've only watched the first 3 episodes, but they are phenomenal visually. There is so much detail in the shading and lighting, as well as the line thickness. The painted backgrounds are beautiful, the animation is smooth, and there's such great facial expressiveness. Action is directed so well, with such dynamic shots. This is the very definition of they don't make them like they used to. And while I don't know exactly how this looked on original CRTs via VHS, as you can see, modern HD restorations look superb. As for the sound, the music throughout the show perfectly fits the task and ranges from classical to fantastical and mystical. The OP and ED are both tender 90s love songs paired up with this gorgeous animation and beautiful still images, respectively. And since I watched the English dub for this, I will also add that the English dub is well above average as far as 90s anime dubs go.
Kim has assured me he's being quite gentle with your friend.
The boy couldn't kill time if he wanted to.
So, Record of Lodoss War really excels in the realms of aesthetics. But what about the story and the characters? Well, the episodes open with this epic narration about how the Age of the Gods has come to an end, and it ended with the armies of the God of Light and the God of Darkness clashing, which culminated in a battle that appeared to destroy both sides, both gods, and rended from the continent a new land, a cursed land, which became known as Lodoss. We meet our D&D-style party of heroes as they enter an abandoned dwarven tunnel, which used to be the home of skilled dwarf craftsmen, but that was a long time ago, and now it's a treacherous place for a dungeon crawl, where you're as bound to find traps as you are to find treasure.
Our main point of view character is the human knight Parn. He wears the armor of his father, who we learn in a flashback was a great knight, but something terrible and regrettable happened to him. Now Parn's party are seeking the wisdom of an old man named Wart, because he's the only one who can tell them what they need to know about an evil witch named Carla. Speaking of which, unbeknownst to the heroes, Carla has appeared before Wart, and she mentions how it's been such a long time since the great battle in the depths of the labyrinth, when Wart with his 6 companions attacked a demon king, and she, Carla, was someone he had vowed to protect. It turns out that Carla used to be one of the 6 great heroes of the past. But now she's the feared Grey Witch, who, if I understand the episode correctly, is the one responsible for waking up the dragon at the ending of the cave. The party enters an obvious Dark Souls boss arena and are faced with a terrifying foe, the once sleeping dragon, who appropriately comes across as an enormous challenge. The dwarf lands a bold strike, and this thief character must have rolled like a nat 20, because he lands this throwing dagger right in the dragon's eye, which allows Parn to thrust his sword into the soft, fleshy gullet. When the party clears Carla's obstacle, she says that she wants to see fate balance the scales of history. That's all she desires. But the exact nature of her motives remains a mystery, and the narrator says that the hero's journey has only just begun. Which is kind of true. See, episode 1 actually takes place chronologically between episodes 5 and 6, so the actual beginning of our story is in episode 2. While it's a bit unusual to structure the series like this, I think it makes a great deal of sense and was the right call. This way, right from the start, you get the full party and get to see their dynamics both in and out of battle. And what better way to entice new viewers to check out the rest than culminating your first episode in an intense battle with a towering dragon? Episode 2 has 2 stories going on from the start. The dwarf Gim is going off to find a missing girl named Lelia, who disappeared 7 years ago, and he reunites with the sorcerer Master Slain, who he attempts to convince to join him. Meanwhile, Parn saves a young woman from a band of goblins, before being approached by the cleric Ato, who tends to his wounds. However, in the process of fighting off the goblins and saving the girl, Parn had killed one of the goblins, and the town is upset because now those monsters are going to come back to seek revenge. Here's where those 2 stories converge, as Gim and Slain appear to help fight the goblins. When Parn struggles alone against a powerful opponent, which is framed almost like a mini-boss, Gim and Slain stand by and watch, as though they were measuring the boy's potential. And upon using the enchanted effects of his father's blade, Parn smites the foe. The mayor announces that he's sending Parn out as the town's representative to investigate the growing darkness and evil spreading throughout Lodoss. To his surprise, Ato, Gim, and Slain offer to join him, and Deedlit observes from the branches above. To be honest, I was predisposed to write off Parn as a boring, default, human guy with sword protagonist. But, in all fairness, episode 2 builds him up pretty nicely, with more of his backstory and further intrigue about his father and the uncertainty of what exactly happened to him. I also like how effective the goblins are as a threat, but an early level threat. Totally believable for this point of a D&D style campaign or an RPG game. In episode 3, we meet who may be the big final opponent of the series, the evil emperor, Beld. As a curious side note, apparently I'm not the only one who thinks he looks at least a little like Ganondorf. And look, I'm not saying that they're identical, but this character design predates Ocarina of Time by, like, 8 years. Gim and Parn spar.
Gim is much more experienced and skilled, but to his credit, Parn has tenacity and a hot-headed persistence going for him. After Parn is reminded in no uncertain terms that he still has far to go, Deedlit appears and introduces herself to him. She talks about how there are fairies inside of all living things, which Parn may have already known, but he acts like he'd forgotten. Another quick aside, in episode 1, she also explained to Parn the lore that the gods died in their own war long ago. And I think it's interesting that she knows this, but Parn doesn't. Like, how common is this knowledge among the people? Are there other interpretations or other understandings of the gods? Do all people and all races in this land even believe the same accounts and perspectives? And how significant is it that this is a world in which the gods died and left the world behind, their creation in ruin? You can say that the gods of light were the good ones, but either way, their reckless fighting destroyed both sides, leaving mortals to pick up the pieces, and sadly, potentially repeat this cycle of endless, needless war, with mortals on the side of light and mortals on the side of darkness as potential proxies for the trigger-happy gods of old. Anywho, Parn and Deedlit are attacked by these were-creatures, called kobolds, with a dark elf leading them. But when the others arrive, the dark elf retreats with his rabid muscle. The party is then arrested by Alanian soldiers, and they share a prison cell with a thief, called Woodchuck, who you already know must join the party, since he was in episode 1. When their captors realize that among them is a priest of Phallus, they release the party and ask for their forgiveness. Which, yeah, actually totally feels like something that could happen in a tabletop campaign. It's the advantage of having a diverse party, right? This kingdom, Alania, is known as a society of academics and intellectuals, not warriors. So there's some interesting discussion here about how their army is made up of outcasts, who are stronger and more violent than what's normal in Alania. Parn, remembering Gim's taunts from earlier, decides to prove to him, and prove to himself, that he can handle the journey ahead, so he spars against the captain. His party remarks how sloppy Parn's fighting is, but the captain sees potential in him and offers to train him. Alania needs strong men. But what's unlucky, to put it lightly, is that Beld's forces are right there, with the full intent of destroying the kingdom. And when they attack that night, they sow devastation everywhere. The enemy has undeniably superior forces and stronger sorcery. The captain advises the party to flee. They aren't Alanian soldiers. They can run. But he has to stay, because he has a job still left to do. This captain is a strong example of a simple side character done right. He doesn't have a lot of personality or much time in the show, but his impact on Parn is believable, since he's this older knight who, no doubt on some level, reminds Parn of his father, and he has to watch him advance toward a certain death, and shamefully let it happen and run away. And as the captain is slain, and as the city falls, and as the red embers rise, the ending narration emphasizes how this war is both far-reaching and, now, personal. Record of Lodoss War is very much a classic good versus evil, Dungeons & Dragons style high fantasy story, not unlike Lord of the Rings or a classic Final Fantasy. You've no doubt seen something like it before, so the story's greatest pitfall is that, at least 3 episodes in, it's not surprising. It's built from these time-tested archetypes and tropes of the genre, i.e., you might think it's generic. But much as I love media that's unique and challenging, not everything has to be subversive or a deconstruction of its genres. Lodoss may or may not have major twists down the road later. I don't know. But if it remains like this, if it follows this well-trodden path, what I can say is that it still exists as a great example of the genre. It may not be revolutionary, but it is exemplary, with a very strong foundation, characters with a whole lot of potential, and an absolutely top-tier aesthetic.
Fantasy fills my heart. I'll never wonder anymore. For all the love I have for you.
自分に合った健康法を持つべし。定期的に健康診断を受けるべし。かかりつけの医者を持つべし。健康のもとなり3本の矢。
What I've been learning is that anywhere you look, you can find some wild connections within the Japanese anime industry, provided you look hard enough. Like, a lot of these 1990 series have been the 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but with Death Note. Such is the case with Robin Hood no Daiboken, or The Great Adventures of Robin Hood. Because this obscure, little-known Robin Hood cartoon, with currently only one review on my anime list, shares direction credits with Dot Hack, Black Clover, Soul Eater, and Fire Force, and writing credits overlap with Naruto Shippuden, Inuyasha, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Most bafflingly of all, thanks to Ryutaro Nakamura's involvement in the script, you could say that The Great Adventures of Robin Hood was written by the man who later that same decade would bring you Serial Experiments Lane. But funny as it is to just tell you out of context that Robin Hood is Chopper and Friar Tuck is King Dedede, maybe the most actually helpful context is that this was made by Tatsunoko Production, the same company that in 1979 made the movie version of My Daddy Longlegs, and in the same year as The Great Adventures of Robin Hood, the original Kyoto Ninden Tiandi. And this Robin Hood anime reunited Koichi Mashimo and Mizuho Nishikubo, who previously in the 1970s had worked on the direction for Tatsunoko Productions' Time Bokan and Gatchaman 2. So the last anime that we're going to look at for 1990 is a children's cartoon where Robin Hood and his friends aren't adults, but children or young teens. And before we get to anything else, I just have to say, the English language theme song is wonderful.
Come along if you can to join a merry band. Fight on and never lose. Good luck to you, Robin of the Forest.
Nottingham is under the rule of the evil Baron Alwyn and his greedy partner Bishop Hartford. Together, they've plundered and taxed the people to the point of starvation, all while hunting down anyone who stands a chance of challenging their rule. This includes Robin Hood's father and their family, the Huntingtons. As their home is burned down, the young Robin Hood chances upon his father's bow, and, remembering his father's call to be brave, chooses to face the attackers head-on. This leads to a confrontation with a mysterious enemy, Baron Alwyn's most trusted knight, Gilbert. Robin Hood shoots a well-aimed arrow and manages to cut him, which prompts Gilbert to vow revenge before retreating. Robin Hood escapes with his family into the forest. Now they're orphaned in the dark and scary woods. But the tension is dissolved when there's a surprise attack by a cute flying squirrel, one that will become the anime mascot. Only for things to again spike up in intensity when they get chased by a bear, fall into a river, and hang onto a drifting log for dear life while rushing towards a waterfall. There's a bit of a mood whiplash going on, but I'll admit I really like this bit here with the log being flung around. They wake up in a pile of hay after Friar Tuck finds and saves 3 of them, plus the flying squirrel. However, Robin Hood's cousin is still missing, so they go searching for her. But before they set foot, Friar Tuck warns that Sherwood Forest can be a dangerous place, and he advises not to struggle against nature, but instead to learn to harness nature's power, and it will work for you. A short distance away, a young bandit named Much is about to rob some wealthy travelers. His giant warriors scare all of the men away, which leaves only the young Marion, who appears from within the carriage and starts screaming until she faints.
Huh? Hey, what was that?
Scream!
It's very close. Mm-hmm.
If you don't stop that awful noise, my giants will eat you up!
When Robin Hood arrives, he quickly realizes that these so-called giant warriors are just 2-dimensional cutouts being puppeted by a team of children. They next meet Big John, who Robin Hood and his family belittle for playing with a cat. When they start to call him Little John, he gets upset and challenges Robin Hood to a duel. And honestly, it might be the least effectual duel of all time. While they're facing off, there's this distracting comedic music, and it also keeps cutting away to Marion and the cousin they were looking for, Winifred, who conveniently wound up here after John had saved her. Baron Alwyn's troops interrupt the proceedings. They're after Marion, who has been forced to surrender and obey the Baron, or else he will have her family killed. Empowered again by his father's blanket call to be courageous and fear no one, Robin Hood beats back Alwyn's troops. There's this cool moment when he draws his bow in order to make a pivotal shot. And the team must have agreed that this was cool, because this animation will get reused in future episodes whenever Robin Hood needs to make a decisive shot. My first impression of episode 1 is not the strongest. And not all of that is totally fair to the great adventures of Robin Hood. I just finished watching the first 3 episodes of Record of Lodoss War, and they set the bar high. While they're aimed at different demographics, both of these series are action fantasy, and both draw from tales of quests and corrupt kings. Again, I won't say it's totally fair, but even the English dubs don't compare well. It's not just the generally more amateurish voice acting in some roles, but also the rather questionable audio quality that occasionally pops up in the recordings. Still, I enjoyed the voice acting of the villains, especially Baron Alwyn.
Gilbert, why do you, my bravest captain, concern yourself with these outlaw scum?
I have a score that I must settle with one of them, and I wish to kill him.
Oh!
More than anything, the biggest setback is the pacing, which feels a bit rushed in some spots, and similar issues continue into episode 2, which, at least in the English dub, results in this awkwardly paced conversation.
I can't leave you here, Marion.
I'll be all right, Robin. My parents' castle's not far from here. I don't want the Baron's men to catch you.
Well, yeah, if you put it like that, Marion.
Thank you so much for saving my life, Robin.
This conversation also confuses me a bit, because here, when she mentions being from the Lancaster household, Robin says that he had no idea that she came from such a respected family. But in the previous episode, she had already literally told him that she's a Lancaster.
My name is Marion, and I am one of the Lancaster family. Baron Alwyn has blackmailed my parents into giving me to him. If I do not go, he will destroy our castle and burn our crops.
Anyways, they part ways, which seems like a really bad idea, because now Marion is going off into the woods on her own. And sure enough, next time we see Marion, she's lamenting not having anything to protect her, such as her solid gold cross that she lost. Cut to Much, and he's got the golden cross, but when he's scared away by some kind of giant sea monster, he abandons it on the spot. Friar Tuck muses about hippogriffs running through the sky and forest pixies, and he says that he really does believe in all of this, that it's not just kid stuff. And when Much conveniently falls directly in front of Robin Hood and his family and tells them about the giant sea monster that frightened him, Robin Hood recalls Friar Tuck's words and decides to investigate further this mystery of nature. However, when they actually get there, the only thing that emerges is a log, which prompts plenty of laughter. But Much came across in episode 1 as more of a trickster, and it wouldn't make sense for the same log to come around twice the same way. So, sure enough, there is more to it. Much more to it. An actual sea monster. A real big fish. But when Baron Alwyn's men attack it, the fish scares them into retreat. Spurred on by Friar Tuck's words to not fight nature, but instead work with it, Robin Hood risks his life to dislodge the spear from the fish's back, which in the end saves the day. Oh yeah, Maid Marian. It looks like she's doing fine. Gilbert is there to save her, but they don't really get to talk because she faints right away. That's how girls are in this show, I guess. When they're not needing rescuing or screaming, they're fainting. Episode 3 opens up with Robin Hood feeling out of it, and he finally spits out what's on his mind with this odd exchange.
Will, I've got to go back to our castle.
What if Baron Alwyn's soldiers find you there? They'll kill you!
Yeah, I know. I have to go, Will. I have to see if anything's left. See it with my own eyes.
Well, don't tell the girls about it. Elsa want to come along with you. The squirrel too, imagine that. Fangs a lot, huh? Hey.
At the same time, Marion is off appreciating how tall and handsome Gilbert is. She gives him flowers, and their hands touch. And I can't tell how cute this is supposed to be because I can't tell how old these characters are, since it feels like there might be a concerning age gap, but I absolutely can't tell for sure. And in any case, we know that Gilbert is evil and Robin Hood's enemy, so regardless, it's a love that must never be. Alas. They go their separate ways, and Marion spends the rest of the episode doing what she does worst, screaming and being useless.
Oh, help! Help me! Oh, if only that brave and handsome knight were here, he would help me.
And Gilbert does what he does best, vowing revenge.
I will be avenged. Sherwood Forest cannot hide you forever. Robin!
Tuck Friar-splains to Robin that only good people can use his family's enchanted bow. And you just know that this is in some way going to come back into play later when Robin Hood has his rematch with Gilbert, back at the ruins of his family's home. Amidst a generally lackluster supporting cast, Gilbert is easily the show's most interesting character in these early episodes. He's an anime rival who absolutely murders people for corrupt authorities, but he also believes in honor and courage, which means that he won't fight an unarmed Robin Hood. However, when Gilbert does genuinely best him, he chooses to finish him off with his father's own bow, which of course, he can't draw. After some radical flips, Robin Hood gets injured by crumbling debris, and Gilbert spares him because he won't slay someone who's wounded. But he will slash in half the image of Robin Hood's father to humiliate the boy. Meaning, episode 3 leaves Robin trapped under the wreckage of his childhood home, in the pouring rain, with Gilbert disappearing into the darkness, and the promise hanging in the air that soon they'll face each other again. The Great Adventures of Robin Hood is a perfectly fine kids show, and for you Robin Hood heads out there, it's probably an interesting adaptation to check out. But after seeing the first 3 episodes, I gotta say that I personally don't have the current motivation or interest to watch all 52 episodes. Even if I'm curious about the themes regarding nature and the supernatural, and I like Gilbert, and I want to know if they go to the moon like in the opening, the pacing and execution are barriers to me wanting to keep watching. But hey, thanks to the magic of the internet, at the very least, we can all still listen to that absolute jam of an opening song whenever we want. And that is 7 anime from the year 1990. Of course, that isn't all that there is. 1990 was also the debut of other anime that I haven't covered, including Chibi Maruko-chan, Karasu Tengu Kabuto, RPG Densetsu Hepoi, and Mitsume ga Toru. Which means all that's left is the annual roundup, where I have subjectively ranked each of the anime that I've checked out from worst to best first impressions. In the bronze tier and 7th and 6th places, respectively, are The Great Adventures of Robin Hood and NG Knight Ramune and 40. Robin Hood had some uneven aspects, and Ramune's first 3 episodes didn't really leave a strong impression on me. Next up is the Silver tier, which features 3 shows that are more conditional recommendations. In 5th, 4th, and 3rd are Samurai Pizza Cats, My Daddy Longlegs, and Tanoshii Muumin Ikka. While Samurai Pizza Cats can be quite rinse, lather, and repeat, the irreverent humor of the English localization and dub gives it an undeniable charm. The biggest surprise of 1990 might be My Daddy Longlegs, which by all early accounts looks to be a promising children's show with some interesting themes. This is equally as true for the Muumin anime, but the visual and sound experience on offer lands Muumin 1 spot higher. And in the Gold tier, reserved for essential viewings and genuine gems, are the 2 anime from 1990 that I definitely want to go back and explore more in the future. Nadia, Legend of the Blue Water, and Record of Lodoss War. Both stand out as exceptionally well-animated takes on classic story concepts. If you're more into lightly sci-fi Atlantean sea adventures, check out Nadia. But if you prefer high fantasy Dungeons & Dragons fare, opt for Lodoss. And if you like both of those things, watch both, and you'll probably have a good time. And if you've watched this video up until now and have had a good time, consider helping me out by giving the video a like. Seeing as this is the first installment in what I would like to make a long and ambitious series, any likes and comments on the video could really go a long way with the algorithm. So let me know if you've seen any of these shows from 1990, or if you want to see me cover a specific anime in an upcoming episode. And you can also find me over on Patreon, where every month I release a less scripted video highlighting my first impressions of shows and movies that you can suggest. And you also get your name in these fancy credits. Speaking of which, I'm going to get those rolling, and we'll see each other next time in the year 1991. Ciao!
Days of romantic prose and lilac wine. Nights out under the sky, watching stars align. Days of making sweet honey, Melissa. As warm as your breath on my chest, so calm.